Okay, you guys can kick it off.
Cool. Hey, everybody. Two people and Tammy.
I wish I could see people.
If we have not met before, I'm Tori Hunt, and this is Chelsea Phillips with Onward Agent Services.
That's where we're looking, right?
Sure. So what we do is transaction coordination, database management, and marketing. But a big reason why we are here is we do offer transaction coordination for agents. So that's what we specialize in, is contract to close specifically. We do offer pre-listing services, but that's, I think, why we were asked to teach today. I don't know, maybe no one else would do it, but here we are. But really what we're gonna go over today, we thought that it would be most beneficial to you guys is just to go through the entire contract to close process from start to finish. Those major milestones, next steps, some tips and tricks that we've learned from how long we've done it, and feel free to stop and ask questions throughout, but that's kind of our game plan for today. So if Chelsea will get started on, you've gone under contract. So what's next?
Yes. So, and by the way, if anyone wants, this is so weird not being able to see anybody. I'm going to talk to you, Tammy.
Okay.
Just directly
I
to you
need
the
all the
whole time. No, so really, in my opinion, the beginning of a contract and what you do at the beginning is the most important thing. And doing all of these things at the beginning, within a couple of days of it going under contract is really important, because once a contract kind of gets going, other things start happening. And if it's like you don't have this base of things taken care of at the beginning, things kind of start to get lost in the mix, and you're like doing too many things at once, and that's how things get dropped. So we do have a checklist that we follow. I kind of edited it to be more generic, since there's, obviously things we do in our day-to-day jobs that if you're an individual agent, you might not do. So if you want copies of this checklist at the end of class, I don't know, I'm sure Nicole can get us your emails.
Yeah, we'll give this
everything,
contract
so.
to close checklist to Nicole, and she can email it to you.
So the first thing I do when I get a contract is, I'm getting a contract from another agent. But I go into the DocuSign room and I organize it, because there's going to be things that you don't need. There's going to be old offers that you need to delete. So I go in and organize everything, clean the room up. And you guys know what I mean when I say a room, right? The DocuSign room, the file. So I clean all of that up and make sure that I'm going to send out the right document, because you know how DocuSign is. It makes copies of things, and here's a contract that doesn't have the agent's signature, or it's missing a box, or it's not fully signed by the clients, and there's 3 other copies that are. So anyway, just going in and organizing that and making sure you are looking at the final contract, and that it's complete. Because if you send out something that isn't fully signed, that's not going to work. So step number 1, organize your room.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not familiar with DocuSign. Can you archive those or do you delete those?
You can do either.
Okay.
I would suggest starting out, use the archive button, don't delete. And the thing is, things can be fixed. Don't freak out too much. But yes, archive is probably going to be the best option, because then if you're like, oops, that was something I needed, you can go back and get it. But at least it won't be in your view and in your way.
All right.
So something that is super important, and when I started out as an agent, I never did this. I never did this until I became a TC, and I realized how important it was. Make yourself a cover sheet. And what a cover sheet is, I should have brought one of ours.
Keller KW has one. It's a little busy. So I suggest maybe making your own, but that's something that we'll have Nicole send out as well. Yeah, you totally can.
Okay.
But the cover sheet that Keller Williams has, it's just a generic cover sheet, almost a cheat sheet for you
I can't see that probably.
and everybody else.
I'm just gonna say it. It doesn't show up very well on that board. So basically, a cover sheet is something that you're gonna send to the lender and the title company along with the contract documents, and it tells them the information that they're going to need. So for example, the title company is going to need to know what the commission is. They're gonna need to know, does the agent charge a transaction fee? Is it, don't just assume the title company is going to know, hey, this is 3%, because that is not always the case. They're going to want to know, hey, 3% on this side, and you don't have to tell them the other agent's commission because that's kind of their job. Tell them your commission. Is there a transaction fee? They're going to need the client's names and contact information because they will need to reach out to your clients. The title company is going to want to know the lender's contact information. And even if I'm on the seller side, I like to have the lender's contact information as well, just so I make sure everyone has it. They're going to want to know, just the basics, the high points. Is there earnest money? How much is it? When does this close? What day did it go under contract? And these things are to help you as well. So while there's some information that the title company does need, this cover sheet is a great tool for you to be able to glance at and know the high points, like what day is the inspection notice due? What day is the earnest money due? What day did this go under contract? Because you're going to need all of these things later when you're going to fill out things in command and all that. And instead of having to go into your DocuSign, sift through the contract, find these dates, make yourself a cover sheet with all the high points. So it's like a summary. So that is the next thing I do, fill out my cover sheet. And this is really important. So, make sure you're doing this, you're not rushing through that. Because if you accidentally put a wrong date on that and you're using that to reference, that could get you in trouble. So really, that's the thing I kind of sit down and make sure my 100% focus is on is filling that out. So I don't put the wrong date on anything. Okay, so once I do that, then this is when you're gonna start sending all of your documents out. So attach this cover sheet with the packet that you're going to send to the title company and the lender. So usually that's going to be obviously your contract. If it's a government loan, you're going to want the government loan writer in there. If there's any amendment that was filled out as the contract was being signed, anything that the title company and lender would need to know as far as, was there a contract date change? Did the commission change as we were filling out this offer? That kind of thing. Counter offer. Yes, they need the counter offer. And I usually send this intro email to everyone involved. So it's going to have title company, lender, other agent, because I want the other agent to know who all is involved. Hey, look, I sent this out, kind of thing. And then we have a nice little email chain going that everyone can just communicate in. So we don't have 18 different emails out and everyone's responding. I like to have one email chain at the very beginning with everyone involved, so everyone knows what's going on. So send that out with your cover sheet. I just like to say, hey, here's a new contract. I'm the buyer's agent, or I'm the listing agent, or I'm the transaction coordinator, please let me know if you need anything, and they will have all the information they need on that cover sheet. So after that, you're going to want to get your clients, knowing what they're going to do next. I call it my next steps email. So it's basically, depending on whether you have the buyer or seller, it's going to have different things in it. But I just have an email template that I send to every client, and it's like, hey, here's what's going to happen next. I've sent your contract to the title company, and they might be reaching out to you with questions. Same with your lender. I've sent it to your lender. They might have questions as well. Thank you, Tori. If you have the buyer, hey, time to start looking at home insurance. So reach out, as the TC, since we're not the agent, we don't necessarily give specific companies, unless the agent gives us a list. But you as the agent, if you have people you recommend, this is where you're going to want to put this in one email so they know what's going to happen next. Cover all of these things. Hey, title company lender might reach out to you. Go ahead and start getting your home insurance quotes, because the lender is going to need to get in contact with their home insurance agent as soon as possible. Here's the closing date. What time of day is gonna be best for you? This is when you would talk about inspections and, hey, we're needing to get an inspection set up ASAP. Like, here's who I recommend. Let's, pick one of these and we need to get that scheduled. This is also when I ask with the inspection, is this inspection going to be paid at closing or is it going to be paid upfront? Because that is a biggie. Usually if it's a first-time home buyer and they have the seller paying $5,000 of closing costs, probably the inspection's going to be billed at closing, but that needs to be known.
When you schedule your inspection.
When you schedule the inspections, you can let the inspector know. And then when you get that invoice, you can then send it to the title company. The title company will add it to the closing.
How would that work for contingencies? If the buyer or if the seller's going to pay some closing costs, but they can get out of the deal, I guess.
Yeah, so unfortunately, if the deal falls apart, that inspection does fall on the buyer. And I think that's something on the agent to make very clear when you're going through the process. And that's something I was going to add as a good rule of thumb is to tell your clients every step of the transaction 3 times. And I'd recommend one of them being in writing. So when you do your first initial buyer's consultation or seller's listing appointment, I would have timelines, and you guys can find these. There's plenty of resources online. You can build your own, put your own spin on it. If you have any questions, you can come see us. But we like to have just the major milestones of the contract, sit down, give it to them, and just kind of be like, it's information overload, but just so you know, once we do find your home or once we do sell your home, this is what's going to happen throughout the contract. And then the next time, while you're searching for the home, they find the one they want and they're just kind of like, this looks a little fishy, or we're not sure about this part on the house, just be like, well, that is why we do inspections. I do want to make sure that we're very clear. If you put an offer on this home and it does not, go through inspection negotiations and it falls through, you are out $350, because some buyers are going to be like, no harm, no foul. We'll put an offer on it. We'll go under contract. We'll do the inspection. No big deal. They're out $350 at least. I would say that's the cheapest inspection. So be very clear about that, because that's a good question. If your contract falls through, that is on the buyer to pay.
Yep. Only if the contract makes it to closing, are those seller concessions taken care of? So again, an appraisal is the same thing. If it doesn't make it to closing, your buyer is responsible for that appraisal fee.
Yeah, having a lender background, that's why I brought that up, is because it was, there was definitely getting money for appraisals after the deal had fallen through.
Nightmare.
You're like, you owe us $700 and mortgage.
Nightmare.
Yeah. And that's, just like Tori said, that's why over explaining is not a bad thing. And that's why, you as the agent, when you were going under contract, you were obviously having these conversations in person, like you're talking about inspections, but I'm telling you, send this follow-up email, I call it the next steps email to the client, listing all of this stuff, because they're going to be so overwhelmed and excited about their new house, or excited about selling their house. They're not going to remember anything you just said. So having it in a follow-up email, I bullet point it. I try not to make it this big, huge, just long text of an email. Bullet point, make it as organized and as straightforward as possible. Listing, here's what you need to do. And again, that's, hey, title company is going to reach out to them. And I always include in my email, lender and title company will reach out to you. You need to respond to them quickly. These contracts, there's a lot that needs to happen. They're fast. It's a fast-paced market right now. Make sure they know, this isn't something to put off for a week, these responses. You need to respond to them immediately. So respond, home insurance, let's set up inspections. Is there a certain time of day that's going to work best for closing that day? Because, closing times fill up. So don't wait, necessarily till the last second to get that scheduled. And then again, is the inspection going to be paid at closing? Is it going to be paid outside of closing? Get all of these things in the beginning so that, you can get it organized and it's done.
If, sorry to cut you off. If it is paid early, does that affect like what your cost to close is, or can that still be added in even if it's paid for?
No, it won't be. So the way that it works, and I think another rule of thumb, a lot of inspection companies offer a discount if it's paid at the time of the inspection as well. So best to do is educate your client. I think Cornerstone saves like $75 if they pay at the time of the inspection rather than at closing. But a big thing is, and why Chelsea is saying to find out beforehand, is the title company will not know about the inspection needing to be paid unless you send them an invoice. So it's not an automatic, it's not something that they just kind of expect to come in. It is totally a la carte, like just like a repair invoice or anything like that. It is not on their radar until you send it. So I would say if they pay it at the time of the inspection, you won't even get title companies asking you for an inspection invoice or anything. They're going to send you typically one email asking if there's any fees or invoices they need. But if it's already been paid, then you don't worry about that.
But if the seller pays closing cost, is that something that you could have reimbursed?
So it won't be reimbursed. So that's the thing. If you kind of have to, and this is, you said you were a lender before, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a good thing to like talk to the lender about, like, hey, what are we looking at as far as estimated closing costs, you know? Because if you say you have $2,000 in seller paid concessions, and so there might not even be room for the inspection at that point to be paid for it. So it's kind of one of those things, consulting with the lender on, hey, what's the estimation here? The title company can tell you what the fees are going to be very quickly after it goes under contract too. So you can kind of look at those things and do the math and see where it's going to fall. But yeah, if the client pays for the inspection outside of closing, that's not really something that you can send to closing and then get reimbursed for.
No,
It's
and
kind of either
sometimes
or.
they can find with seller's concession, sometimes they can find other things to fall under that umbrella if it is overpaid. But I will say I recommend talking with lender and title before that offer is submitted on how much closing costs will be, especially if you have like a first time home buyer or someone who just doesn't have, they're kind of tight on cash up front. Because it can play a huge difference, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 extra dollars that they were not expecting on top of their down payment. Did that kind of answer your question?
It did. Thank you.
Okay, good. The other thing that I kind of wanted to highlight when we were going over that next steps email, if there is earnest money involved, a huge contract change is it used to default to 10 days that earnest money was due. It's now 5, and our contracts run through weekends with the due date. So say that you go under contract on a Friday, the day 1 of your contract is the next day after everyone has signed. So that would say Saturday's day 1, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, your earnest money is due by the end of the day. Unless you've changed that in your contract, which I maybe kind of recommend, because that's 3 days for the buyer to get with title and get that squared away. Whether it's, if they're out of town, they can wire it, direct deposit, or cut them a check, but it is to the title company. Everyone has to have an earnest money receipt and it needs to be paid by the end of that business day. So I would say that's number 1 on my list, especially whenever we see a contract, is to make sure whoever is paying that earnest money knows what to do. So take it to that title company, send them the address, and then just make sure that they're getting that paid on time.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I totally forgot about that. Because
We just noticed it one day on the contract and we were like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, but it's 5 days now. But that is part of my next steps email. I say, hey, your earnest money is due this day. Like, here's the address of the title company. The check is always made to the title company. So whatever the title company name is, you just fill that in. Hey, make it to here. Now, some title companies, not a lot of them, are starting to offer online payment options, which is awesome. A lot of them still don't. Hopefully that'll change in the near future, because then it can be an instant payment where no one has to drive all the way to the title company with a check. So anyway.
So is this change, is this something with our contracts at Keller, or like, is this like a statewide or nationwide thing?
It's on the residential sales contract that we use for this area. So, I mean, it is a MAR contract, but if you go sell a house in Kansas City or in St. Louis, they just use different contracts by preference. But our residential sales contract that we're using here. So from brokerage to brokerage, really anytime you sell a house in this area, you're gonna see that same contract. But it does, I will say again, it does have a blank spot. So just like your inspection notice, just like your appraisal contingency financing, you can change that. It's if there is nothing put in that spot, it defaults to 5 days, and it used to be 10, which is a very comfortable amount of time for the earnest money. So a lot of people are just not, you know, you see the inspection notice and a lot of people are in, you know, the rhythm of asking for 15 days because inspectors can get backed up, but they're not used to that with the earnest money. So I would say if I am the buyer's agent and I'm writing an offer, what's the harm in asking for 10 days to give everyone a little bit of flexibility, because you know, there's just a lot that happens. So you can change that day. I do want to highlight that.
Okay. Any other questions on like just those initial emails and what to send to who and what information to include in those?
Do you know exactly what I guess is considered underneath like sellers closing costs and buyers selling or buyers closing costs?
That's a really good question for title.
Okay.
Well,
I mean, we kind of know. It's just like exactly in detail. It's going to depend on what box they checked on the contract first.
yeah.
Because typically people would choose option C, where buyers and sellers kind of split it equally. It's not equal, but somewhat equally, they kind of share those costs. But I always, because it's going to depend on the title company, the lender, the price of the house, like, I mean, what the weather's like that day. I don't know. It changes seriously so much.
And as far as like buyer closing costs versus seller closing costs. So buyer, and this is like, pretend that your buyer is not asking for any seller paid concessions or closing costs. The word can be used interchangeably. But as far as what the buyer is responsible for and what the seller is responsible for, buyer, inspections, appraisals, lender fees, and it's kind of like the same thing with the title company. All lenders, they have, the fees are going to vary a little bit. Appraisal, home insurance, what's the word I'm looking for? Like home insurance escrow amount.
Like property taxes.
Yes,
Yeah.
the taxes that are going to be prorated, those kind of things. The seller has way less because obviously they're not paying for inspection or
Buyer
appraisal
pays
or
for
anything.
title search too, don't they?
Yeah, and that's kind of what she was saying about on the contract, depending on what option is picked, it's mostly usually C, so they kind of split those things. And the contract lines out what those things are. And once, you know, once the title company is picked, they can tell you exactly how much that's gonna be.
Yeah.
And Hogan has an online like closing cost estimation calculator, which is great too at any time. I love that about them, but it's also title company specific. So like if someone's wanting to close at Great American Title, you can't go to Hogan's website and see like what you kind of think it's gonna be. Unfortunately, but if someone's choosing to close there, that is something that we've utilized as well, because you can access it at any time. Again, it's an estimate, but it kind of helps if you're deciding how much to ask for sellers concessions.
Yeah, and HOA proration, HOA and taxes are something that's gonna be prorated, and you know, the seller will be credited if they've paid for a whole year of something and they're selling the house in June, you know, they'll be prorated that 6 months back. So sellers, you know, their title fees, obviously they're paying the commission. And then if there's any kind of taxes they owe or whatever, that'll be prorated, so.
And then on the contract underneath like seller concessions, that's pretty much, and I'm just like clarifying, I guess, because I had this conversation probably 15 times with my client right now. He's an older gentleman. He wakes up in a new day every day, so he always needs me to re-explain it. But then it made me start questioning myself. So I just wanted to like double check.
You're good.
So seller concessions are just like a buyer asking the seller to pay part of the buyer's closing costs, right?
Yep.
But the buyers are responsible for their closing costs unless it's on the seller concessions.
Right.
Yeah, so it'll
Okay.
technically show still, whenever the title company sends out like the Alta or the settlement statement right before closing,
Yeah.
it'll still be showed as all of this stuff is responsible on the buyer. It goes towards their down payment, everything. It's just racking up this total on how much they're gonna have to pay.
Yeah.
And then at the very, very end, it's gonna show $2,500 seller credit or something like
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
And it's just simply money that the seller is putting towards whatever the buyer has to bring to closing that day.
Okay.
The only thing is the title company and lender and things like that, they can't pay towards someone's down payment. So
Yeah.
sometimes they can overpay on concessions and not have anything to put it towards. And that's a good question for title
Mhm.
on what happens with that money then.
Yeah.
I know that they have found ways around it and to figure that out, but that's just kind of how it will show. So it gets kind of confusing. That's why it doesn't say specifically closing costs, because it can
Yeah.
go towards inspections and other
Mhm.
things that isn't typically a closing cost.
For sure.
But that's how it will show right before closing.
Okay.
So it does get really confusing, and I'm glad that you had a buyer asking you 15 times, because I
Yeah.
would say even people who have like bought and sold before,
Sure.
your best friend you're selling a house to, things like that, like they're gonna ask you the same thing so many times.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think best practice would be at least 3 times to walk them through the entire process and putting stuff in writing, because our next steps email is gonna line out a lot of stuff to where hopefully they're like, maybe before I call them, I'm gonna look at this email and see if it answers my question.
Yeah.
And hopefully it does. So I think that'll help. I've literally had someone tell me that they had a friend be like, why is the title company calling me? They wouldn't even pick up their phone and answer the title
Yeah.
company.
Like, please answer.
They wanted to ask their agent why they were calling them. And the agent's like, because you're about to close on a house with them, please answer your phone. Like they need to talk to you right now. But it just goes to show, I mean, you really just, there's so many moving parts.
Yeah.
We're the expert. We do this all the time. We see it all the time.
Sure.
They don't. So that's kind of what we've noticed. If you have a conversation with the client, if you can give them next steps,
Mhm.
even if it's just one next step,
Yeah.
every time you talk to them, even if there isn't a next step, like appraisal just came in, you're clear to close. We don't close for another week. That's your next step.
Yeah.
We don't have anything, everything's good to go. We don't close until Wednesday. So
Yeah.
pack up your boxes and talk to your lender the day before closing, make sure, utilities, whatever, like there's always going to be kind of something there, but I always try to make sure that the person knows what is that next step, because if they don't, I can guarantee they're going to give you another call.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really important for you as an agent to sit down and craft these email templates. Think of, okay, what's going to come up during the transaction? What do I get questions on? What information is important for them to have? And draft a file of your email templates and say, okay, at this point in the transaction, I'm gonna send this out. That's why, because if you're in the moment, you have a million things going on. Going under contract is stressful and crazy. You're just gonna forget if you don't have this stuff planned out ahead of time. So really sit down and like we do, we have our lists and we have all of our templates, and it just, it helps things not be missed. So speaking of things not being missed, the next thing I do, so after I send out everything to the title company, lenders, and
Even if it's a night or a weekend.
Yeah.
They will get to it first thing in the morning. Another thing to keep in mind is title. Lenders, not so much. Title is very good about saying received. Watch for that. Because like Meridian has a generic MTC LLC or whatever for all of their locations. You send a contract to this one email. I want to see a received email, because if you haven't gotten that, there's a chance that it's not getting worked on, and every day matters. So I would say that next business day, give them a day. If you haven't seen received, I would definitely check on that.
Yes, don't be afraid to I don't want to say the word bug them, but kind of,
Nudge.
check in with them. Yeah, nudge.
Nudge 'em.
Yeah, they should be responding to you.
Yeah.
Um,
Is that the buyer's
Well,
agent?
Quick question on seller concessions. Is there like a maximum you can do? Like, obviously this is to give the buyer like as little down as possible, but like prepaid stuff can't be, because that's actually their taxes. Like, you can't add, like, the whole goal is to, if I'm correct, like to bring up the cost of the house so that it'll appraise for 10,000 more or whatever. So you're sort of throwing the numbers off based on the appraisal. Is there anything that you can't, that's technically a buyer cost that can't be added?
So 2 things on that. I would check with title because that changes all the time. So the next time, I know title companies come in here and do lunch and learns and stuff like that often. That's a great question to add or to ask. Or if you have a preferred closer, just take them to coffee or something and get that lined out. So you know that specifically. I know there's not a max technically with the contract, but I will say I know that there is a max with the title company on what those sellers concessions can go towards, correct?
And there is, and I don't want to say the number because I want to confirm it with a lender, but there is a max amount you can ask for on government loans.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to say the number because it might have changed, and I haven't been a selling agent in a while. I've been a TC for a long time, so I just haven't written a ton of contracts.
Do you know that, Max?
Isn't it like 6% of the
Yeah,
sales?
it is at least as of last year. Stuff like that, just like with title companies, changes all the
Always
time.
changes. I know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yes, 6% was sort of the going number, but I don't think with conventional that it matters. And
Right.
Yeah. So I will say the second thing I wanted to add on that is, and in this market, it gets really tricky. If you, and another agent hopefully on the other side will help correct this, those sellers concessions, sometimes people are like, hey, we're going to offer $250, ask for $5,000 in sellers concessions. So let's make it $255. That's the overall sales price, right? So
yes,
now it has to appraise at $255 as opposed to $250. And if I'm the listing agent and I came on the market at the top of the market and I'm a little nervous about it already appraising, that might not go our way. So keep that in mind, especially in the market we're in. If it doesn't appraise for $255, something's got to change. And those sellers concessions sometimes can be what tips the scale. So
yeah, I agree. I was just more thinking you're more likely to get 255 if the contract price is 255 than 250.
yes, yeah.
Kay had a question about what agent sends what, and my answer to that, like as far as when the contract, does the selling agent or the buyer's agent, or does the listing agent or the buyer's agent send that? And my answer to that is never trust the other agent to send anything because sometimes they don't. And you want to start those email chains anyway so that you're included, and you want them to have your email so that they're gonna send you things and they need that. So like if we're on the listing side of something, I always send the contract. And like I said, I still get the lender's information and reach out to them and include them in that email. Even though it's not my buyer, I'm including that lender so they know who I am, know to come to me if they need anything. And I ask them, do you need anything from us? Like, how's the buyer's agent miss sending you a document that maybe I have that I could send to you to get things moving along? So no matter what side you're on, I would say always send it. So after I send all those emails and everyone has what they need, we're gonna do calendar dates. So this is the most simple thing that you can do, and it kind of sounds like, yeah, duh, calendar dates. But I don't know that people actually do it a lot, and it's extremely important and helpful. So at the beginning of the contract, again, this is stuff right when you go under contract that you're gonna do these activities. Set your calendar date for when your inspection notice is due. And that's whether you're the buyer's agent or the listing agent, because as a listing agent, you're gonna want to know when it's supposed to be in your possession. Set yourself a calendar reminder so that it's gonna pop up and give you a notification, hey, that's due today. When the earnest money is due, I invite the clients to that calendar invite too, so it's on their calendar. Closing date, if you don't have the time, just set an all-day event for when the closing date is. When the appraisal contingency is up, you can get that number from the contract depending on how many days the appraisal contingency is set for. So when the appraisal contingency is up, when the loan contingency is up, and then this is the biggie, if you're the listing agent, set yourself a calendar reminder for 5 p.m. the day of closing to change the listing status and flex from pending to closed. Please, for the love of God.
I think they said that was the biggest fine
That's the biggest fine.
that they had at the
that the
board.
board
They
receives.
made like $18,000 last year on people not changing their statuses in the MLS. You have 4 days, but if you close a property that day, it is so out of sight, out of mind, because hopefully you've been on top of it, you're getting paid that day and you're checked out. I mean,
Yes.
you've been worried about that for a month, you're checked out, get that. But if you don't do it that first day, if you don't got it that first day, you don't got it. You're not gonna do it.
There's no
So,
hope. There's no hope after that.
yeah, it needs to be on your calendar, not just a whole day thing, on your calendar, a time that you sit down and change that listing status. Another couple things with those that I want to make sure that we go through, and I know we'll go into more detail, but just a general overview. Your inspection notice is not the inspection report. So the inspection happens, you get the inspection report back typically same day, if not the next day. So keep that in mind when you're scheduling. The inspection notice is now you sit down with your clients, go over the report. If there are any deal breakers that have maybe made them change their mind about the house, they will not buy that house the way it is. This is what you want to put on your inspection notice. And you want to ask the other agent to have their clients either repair or replace, whatever it is. Then you will send the other agent the inspection report and the inspection notice. And that is what has to be done by the end of the day on the inspection notice due date. I also want to highlight that it can be done sooner. We love that.
Yeah.
We love when it's done sooner, because then your inspection resolution due date starts. So that's a moving timeline. That's not something that you can put on your calendar at the start. It's typically 10 days. Again, it can be changed just like the inspection notice, but it's typically 10 days. And once that inspection notice has been sent to the listing agent, that is when your resolution date begins. And just like with every other date, it's the next day that is day one.
Mm-hmm.
So I send it on
Yeah.
a Wednesday, Thursday is day one, just like the contract timeline. If the inspection notice is 15 days and we signed on a Tuesday, Wednesday is day one when you're counting out on your calendar.
Yep.
But for the inspection resolution, you now have 10 days to come to an agreement. So keep in mind, if you're now on the other side and you're waiting to hear back from the listing agent and they're having specialists come out, collecting bids, deciding what they do and don't want to do, but it's due tomorrow and I haven't heard anything, you have to come to an agreement. So I would go ahead and give them a love nudge and just see where it's at, when you can expect it, because you got to give yourself time to get with your clients and see if you like the response.
Mm-hmm.
So keep that in mind. Another thing, same with the appraisal contingency, very similar to the resolution, but it is not just that the appraisal has to happen by that date. The appraisal needs to be agreed upon and everything is good to go by that date.
Yeah.
So you want to give yourself time. I think it takes like 2 or 3 days for appraisals to come back.
Well, and a lot of times I'll go ahead and no matter what side I'm on, when I'm sending out all those intro emails, I'm asking the lender, hey, please let me know as soon as this appraisal gets scheduled. So then I know what day they're going to the property. I put that on my calendar.
Yep.
And then hey, they went this day. We should be getting this within the next few days.
Yeah.
So calendar dates, I cannot stress this enough, and make sure you put yourself, when you make the calendar invites, it gives you the option to give yourself a notification, and you can set it for 2 days before the event, 3 days before, an hour before. Give yourself a 2-day notification. So if the inspection notice is due on the 15th, your phone is going to notify you 2 days before that saying, hey, just a reminder, inspection notice is due in a couple days. And you're like, oh, okay, I need to check on that.
Yep. Yeah.
Those are so important. And not a lot of agents use that. It's like we have this great technology. and people aren't using it. And it's like, set them at the very beginning before things get crazy, because I'm telling you, you think, oh, I know these dates. I know this is due this day. I wrote it down. No, you will forget, because you're going to be writing other contracts and things are going to get crazy. So please do that at the very beginning.
Yeah, another great thing too, guys, is you're partnering with the lender and you're partnering with title, just like we partner with our agents. No one is working for anyone. Everyone is, you know, doing their own thing and doing what they specialize in during this transaction. But sometimes you have to manage it. And that's essentially, you know, that's what we do. It's kind of crazy to think that someone has to hire out someone to help them manage that everybody does their job, but that is really a lot of what we do, just because this market is wild and people are getting backed up and they're not doing what they need to do at the start. You hope they do, but you just never know. And ultimately that falls on everyone in the transaction. So again, with the appraisal a couple months ago, appraisals were so backed out that they couldn't even do 30-day closes because they were waiting on appraisers to come out.
Yeah.
And mind you, the contract defaults to a 25-day contingency. And a lot of times they couldn't even get an appraiser out there within 25 days. So that's something that you might not know when you're going under contract. I know some people like to have the appraisal contingency just go through the day of close. So whether it's 30 days, 45 days, they get into the habit of changing that. You can very well do that. It is something that can be amended if needed. So if they don't get out there in time, you can push that contingency date back as long as everyone agrees to it before it's up. But that's messy. Nobody wants to do that. But I would say your email right at the beginning, when you email the lender and title, hey, lender, let me know once you get that appraisal scheduled, whether you're on the listing or the buy side, let me know once that's scheduled, is going to do a lot for you. Because they're either going to tell you once it's scheduled or they're not. So you're going to know whether it's really close to that contingency date, or if they don't get back to you within a week, that's another love nudge for you. Because they're a lot further out. Inspectors are typically about a week out, and appraisers are way further out. And some lenders will not schedule an appraisal until it has made it a little bit further in the contract, just in case it falls through. Just like we were talking about before, because someone does have to pay for that. So yeah, keep that in mind, but that's just another thing to where when you get back into it and you're doing other transactions, you don't have to come back and be like, whoa, did this happen?
Yeah. So does everyone know, like after this point, after I've sent out everything, and this kind of is happening, this is something you want to do quickly, obviously, is scheduling the inspection. Does everyone know what a CBS code is? Does anyone not know what that is? Okay. So part of scheduling the inspection, obviously, whether you're a TC or the agent, you've talked to the client, so you have the company chosen and you need to schedule the inspection. Also, make sure you know which inspections you need to schedule. There's a lot of different inspections that you can schedule and that are required. A lender is a really good person to ask about that. Like if there's a government loan, you know, they're definitely going to need the termite inspection. You probably want that anyway. But again, just make sure you know what inspections you need to order, because a regular home inspection does not include a well or a septic inspection. You have to order that separately. If the house is on a well or septic, that doesn't just come with it. And there's, you know, you have to get the septic head uncovered sometimes. So make sure you're paying attention to, on the MLS detail sheet, what kind of utilities does this house have? Does it have a basement? Am I going to need to order a radon inspection? Does the client want that? That kind of thing. So knowing what inspections to order is important. And then if you're the buyer's agent and you're the one obviously scheduling this, when I send my introduction email to the other agent, like, hey, here's who I am. Obviously if you're doing this as the agent, they're going to know who you are, but go ahead and get that CBS code. That is a code that the agent will be able to access in their lockbox
App, like the super app.
The super app, yeah. It's just a code that inspectors use to get into the lock boxes. So that way, you're not necessarily having to meet the inspector to let him in. So get the CBS code from the listing agent, if you are the buyer's agent, at the beginning, so that when you schedule the inspection, you can give that code to the inspector so they can get in. Also, make sure the listing agent knows when the inspection is so that the clients can be gone and the inspector doesn't just show up and surprise everybody. So that's important.
Another thing I would add before you order that inspection is to pull up the flex listing. While you're scheduling that, they're gonna need to know the square footage, the year built, things like that. They're also gonna need your client's information, so make sure you have that with you, at least an email for them. Sometimes they want a phone number as well. Again, they're gonna wanna know if it's paid at closing or time of inspection. And then I would say the last thing, we just had a conversation about it this morning. Make sure you know if the buyer wants to be there during the inspection or not. You definitely don't want your clients there without you. So inspectors, you know, their inspections, depending on the size of the house, are going to last between 2 and 3 hours, sometimes more. So if you know beforehand, if your buyer wants to come, they're going to recommend they come during the last 30 minutes of that inspection. So whenever you are scheduling it, you let them know that the buyers do want to be present towards the end and ask them when that best time would be, and they're able to tell you. And then you can go tell your client, hey, scheduled inspection for this day and time. Is this something that you want to still come to? If so, this is the best time to come. They don't need to be there during the whole time, and the inspector can't do their job if they're there. And again, you do not want your clients there without you. So if your clients want to come, guess what? You're going to an inspection.
And here's my suggestion on scheduling inspections. I don't ask anybody, hey, what would be a good time for the inspection? The buyer or the listener? Don't ask that, because that's number one, you'll never find a time that works for everyone. I schedule the inspection. I say, hey, what is your first available? And if they're like, oh, tomorrow at 8 a.m. Okay, maybe that's a little too fast and not enough time to coordinate. But they give me a time and a day that's within a couple days. I'm like, great, I'll get back to you, confirm that that's okay with everyone. I then say, hey, here's the inspection time. Let me know if this doesn't work. And then I set the calendar date and I invite the other agent. And again, like Tori said, prep your clients that they don't need to come and breathe down the inspector's neck the whole time. Let the inspector do their job. Like she said, if they want to come for the last 30 minutes to ask questions, the inspector is usually going to be fine with that, but they don't need to be following the inspector around the whole time. So prepare them for that, they just can get in the way sometimes, frankly.
Yeah, there's really going to be nothing for them to do until the end. And what the inspector is going to do is just kind of run through what they didn't find. Sometimes it can be really beneficial. And I would say that's a really important vendor relationship for you, is to figure out what inspectors you do prefer. If you're newer and you're not sure, we do have preferred vendor inspectors here with the Keller Williams Market Center, Cornerstone, Murawski. They come to team meetings or they're online. Get to know them. That's a good place to start, and just kind of see how that goes. But that's a huge part of it too, is if your client wants to go, you want to make sure that they're great client facing, and they're going to walk them through. And sometimes you can have an inspector be like, hey, this is going to be flagged on an inspection because it has to be, but you could go to Lowe's, buy this and fix it yourself. And then that's going to help you, right? Because you're not a specialist in that area when you're going over the inspection report, to know, hey, we don't need to ask. This isn't a deal breaker. If they want to do it, great. They can go to Lowe's and buy this, or you can go to Lowe's and buy this. And then we just kind of know that's not a deal breaker. That's not as big of a fire as it's going to look on an inspection report when it's in bright red. But keep that in mind. Another thing too with your inspections, it is your responsibility as the agent to give your client options. So with the inspector, whenever it is time to choose whoever they want to use, make sure you have at least 2 or 3 options that you're giving them. Again, if you don't know, we do have preferred vendors here that I would say are good to use. Ask an agent friend or anything like that, or Google it. I mean, shoot, it's just giving them options. Most of the time, my first question to a client is, do you have a preferred inspection company? And 99% of the time, they're gonna say no.
They don't know.
So now that's on you to give them options. You just cannot, everything is the way it is for a reason. You cannot just give them one. You have to give them options and let them choose. If they ask you who you prefer, then you can say who you normally use, but they have to be provided with options. So keep that in mind.
Does anyone have any questions so far? Because we're going to get into like all of the technology and compliance side of things next. So does anyone have any questions on the initial process and start of a contract? Cool.
Love.
Okay, so now you've gone under contract, inspection scheduled, you've sent the contract out, everyone knows who you are and your role. Clients have an overview of what's going to happen and what they need to be working on. So great, things are moving and now you're like, oh, cool, I can take a breath. Your calendar invites are all set so that you're gonna be notified when things are due. We're good, okay. So now we're gonna get into like the Keller Williams back end compliance side of things. So the first thing you did was organize your DocuSign room. So now it's all clean and nice and you only have documents in there that are fully completed, that kind of thing. So this is when you're gonna wanna go through and just be like, okay, what do I know already that needs to be fixed? Because there's always gonna be little errors and mistakes. Should we be going through the?
Oh yeah, no, we're not following the slides because
Sorry.
we're not following the slides. Sorry, everybody. That was an executive decision.
Yeah,
No, I'm just
we're
gonna
speaking
pull
from the
up
heart
command
today.
really quick.
Great. So you're gonna check for these initial corrections like, oh, I know that this signature was missed, or I know this box was checked. So things that you already know of, if you need to correct or send to the other agent, say, hey, I need your client's signature on this, go ahead and send that email and get those initial corrections going. There will be more, and you might not know of any that need to be done at the beginning anyway.
My personal has no opportunities. Obviously, I don't produce.
So we could spend hours on how to use command, but that's for another day. But you guys know you're gonna go in, if you haven't created your opportunity yet, create the opportunity.
Yeah, a good rule of thumb, especially if y'all are starting out, you don't have habits yet, create your opportunities the second someone's like, hey, you're a real estate agent, or what's the housing market like, or whatever. If you're wanting to follow up with them or whatnot, they should be in Cultivate. If they've said that they're interested in selling, they should be in Cultivate. You should have an opportunity started for them, because if you start your opportunity first and then you go to this, I almost touched the screen. I don't think this is a touch screen. And you go to this lovely start a transaction button, it will take you to DocuSign and it will start a room for you in your DocuSign. And then I'd have to sign in. I'm not going to show you that, but it'll start a room for you in DocuSign, and then it's always linked. So again, I mean, we're contract to close, so it's a perfect world and you already did that. That's why we didn't start with that. But keep that in mind. It's going to make your life easier whenever you are using command, because then you'll have this linked and you can choose your documents from your room and just pull them in that way. But the biggest reason why I wanted to go here really quick and show you guys, if you are newer, this is not a contracts class. We're not going to go over contracts. That is a 3-hour class for a reason. But if you're filling this stuff out, it's information overload and you're not exactly sure, or it's already filled out and you're not sure what it's needed, right here is going to tell you this is a buyer opportunity. So it's going to show you, hey, if I have a buyer's consultation, these are the documents that I can already have them fill out. How in the world do I scroll down on this laptop? Do I not?
Share your
Oh, that's the
screen so you
bottom.
can see what you're.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Tammy.
Sure thing.
I did not have that on my radar.
You did.
I think I stopped whenever I got rid of the PowerPoint. I'm a tech gal. Okay, cool. So this is a buyer opportunity. If it was a listing, it's gonna change on what documents are needed and when. But ideally, you could have your consultation, you're gonna have them sign those buyer documents, right? So you're gonna have your Mo broker, your buyer's exclusive agency contract, and your affiliated referral business that they can already fill out while they're home searching. You can have them fill it out, you can submit them in here, get them compliance approved, and then that's 3 less documents you have to worry about when you go under contract. If you have not done that because everything moves quickly, that's okay. They sign it at the time of contract. This is where it goes. So essentially, where I'm going with this is to use Command as your cheat sheet. Because if you click on these documents and you're like, what in the world is that? 1, it's gonna show you what it looks like. And 2, you see this client initials is highlighted. Your client needs to initial both pages. This one needs to be updated because those boxes have to be checked and you have to put the Keller Williams address there. But if you put it in compliance and they kick it back, they're gonna tell you what to fix. But it's a good place for you to start. Especially, you know, if it's late at night and you're filling out one on your own and you're a little lost, come here and it's going to show you what you need to fill out and what compliance is looking for. Another good rule of thumb is if you winged it and now you're going back through and you're kind of wondering like what you're looking at, before putting them all in here and submitting it to compliance and waiting 24 hours for it to get kicked back and have a ton of corrections, you can simply just pull this up and just kind of see what it looks like from the start. So does that make sense?
Yeah, and this is the beautiful thing about Command is,
Under contract.
and personally, I just prefer to do it this way because I am a little OCD and I just think it's cleaner and it's easier for me. But I actually make folders on my own desktop of the property address, and I actually download each individual document from DocuSign into that folder, and that's what I use. And then I manually upload these to Command. It's just another way for me to have an easily accessible folder that I know every single document in there is I hope, the compliant and completely filled out one.
Another cool thing you can do with that, because we have agents that love, you know, they've been in real estate for 10 years and they used to give flash drives with all the documents to their clients or paper copies. Another cool thing you can do if you guys get this compliant, again, we're still in the first week of going under contract is what we're going over. So I would say do all of your intake, like do all of your emails out, do all of your calendar invites, schedule your inspection within a business day. And then my next business day, I'm going to be compliance checking and seeing if I need any corrections.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good rule of thumb for you guys. Your clients are already in that signing mode. If you wait a couple weeks before you send them compliance corrections, they're kind of going to be like, what the heck? We did this weeks ago. What am I even signing? Rather than, oh yeah, that looks familiar. It's not a new document, right? So it's not a red flag in their brain of like, am I now going to sign my life away? It's the same document they've seen. We missed an initial. We missed a checkbox, something like that. And it's a lot easier to ask for those corrections right at the beginning of that contract rather than later. The other thing is it takes 24 hours for compliance to kick back any of the documents you submit, which sounds great. But if you wait until the week before closing, say it's 24 hours for them to kick it back and you've got 3 documents that need corrected, you can't just correct them, right? You have to do that. And then maybe it's a signature or an initial that you need to get from the other side of the transaction. So I would add a couple business days onto that because it's not going to be that easy to get it back. Yeah. So the earlier you guys can do this, the better. Because ideally you could be sitting there with 2 weeks before closing and you'll have really pretty green lights next to that consultation and under contract, which means that whenever it closes, you're getting paid.
Yeah, and the beauty about Command, if you haven't done this yet, and you've put your docs in, and again, this is probably a whole nother class on using the specific technology of this and how to do that. But for now, we're going to give you a general idea. But you've put your documents in here, and just a tip, we don't use these green sheet ones anymore, so don't even worry about that. But put all your docs in, submit. Once compliance sends it back, and you can see, and they're gonna leave you a little note of exactly what they need, which is so nice, because then you don't have to look through and figure it out yourself. So you just, okay, then I sit down, I make a little list, hey, this file needs this, I go knock it out in DocuSign, put it back in, it's compliant now, great. So that's the beautiful thing is, if it's not compliant, they will tell you what you need and why they need it, and you just go fix it. And there's a button over here where you can drop down and say replace document. You throw the corrected one in, submit again, and then hopefully they'll give you the green light. But yes, you want all green over here before the closing day at some point. And again, we don't really have time to go through the exact details on how to create this, but that's when you will fill out the commissions info.
Yep, your offer.
And you'll submit that to Landon. And if you don't know how to do that yet,
There's a class on it.
yeah, there's a class, or
Yeah.
Landon would be happy to show you. We would be happy to show you if you want to come to our office and we'll walk you through how to do this. It looks like a lot, but once you do it once, it's really not that bad. It's great technology. So as you're doing your initial submission of your contracts for compliance, go ahead, fill out your commissions. This can be edited if the sales price changes. That's a really important thing to remember. If sales price changes, you will need to edit this, because your check from the title company needs to match what is in this commissions tab, or else Landon will be angry.
He won't pay you.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, he won't be angry, he won't pay you. Okay, so
I think we're done with that. Any questions over that? I know we're not going over it in detail, but just a little insight.
but those
there.
are the things that you do. You submit your documents, fill out your commissions tab, let it sit for a couple of days, come back and check it to make sure if there's anything that was missed that compliance has said. Yes.
Is an offer different than the commission?
Yeah, so a little backstory on that, whenever they first came out with Command, and it's something they're still working on. The idea is that agents will be able to put every single, if it's a multiple offer situation, they can put every single offer in there in details. And then it's going to compare those offers and spit out a cheat sheet for the client and the agent on highlights of every offer and maybe some downsides to every offer through the app. So it's gonna be really cool. It probably already works. It's just not something that people typically do because they're on a time crunch. But that is why it'll say add new offer. It'll say name your offer, because you can put more than one, and then it asks all of these offer questions. Just put in what's required, and then you'll notice once you put that in, you have to accept the offer. And again, that's just because of where Command was going with that. But you have to do all that, and then it will give you a managed commissions option, and the information that you put in that offer will pull through to the managed commissions. So sales price and things like that.
Yeah, and like I said, whenever you get an offer, just come talk to one of us and we'll show you specifically how to input it. But basically just keep that on your checklist of inputting into Command, filling out the commissions, that kind of thing.
Again, that can be done right whenever you go under contract
Yes,
too.
and
You don't have to wait on
we
that one.
suggest that you do that.
For sure, for sure.
I have a question. I know there's some limitations whenever you have like government loans. Can you entice, like, let's say you were going to put $2,000 or $3,000 down, or into an escrow account? I forget what it's called. What's the word?
Earnest money?
Earnest money.
Yeah.
Could you entice a seller by saying if it doesn't finance, that you can keep $1,000? Something.
Yes. So technically on the contract, this is what's really interesting, and I'm glad you asked that. We won't go into the complete like legality issues of that since we aren't brokers, and that's better for a contract class. But I will say a good rule of thumb is that if a contract defaults, the earnest money goes to the seller. So, and I mean, obviously it's been negotiated before. It doesn't always happen, but it's the best rule of thumb just to know in your brain that if your client is deciding to put down earnest money, that's the point of the earnest money. One, it shows seriousness, especially if it's a cash buyer. But two, it entices that seller, because if they're off the market for 20 plus days and they're still paying their mortgage, hey, if this falls through, we get 1,000, 2,000, whatever that earnest money is.
Is there sort of a max number for that? I mean,
No,
I'm sure there's a,
we had
so
someone.
if you had a really, somebody was an FHA, but just it was a home run, but people were gonna still be scared of it, you could technically go in with an FHA with a $10,000 earnest money offer.
Yeah, the only person I could think that would maybe have issues with that would be a lender, just because and you would know better, but because with government loans, it's different every day on what they do and don't allow, but, and you're
I
typically
think
not.
you'd be okay, so, a lot of times, like a VA might be 100% down, but sometimes those customers have money to put down, but it's
Yeah,
still just a
And they're
benefit.
just choosing
So
not to. Mhm.
as long as you're staying away from like the above, like the 3.5% or 5%, I don't think there would be any limitation as long as they had extra cash to handle it.
Yeah, so
Right.
I mean, also another thing is that will go towards closing, right? So I would say someone could put their entire down payment down as earnest money. Is that the smart decision to do? No, because there's a chance that they could lose it.
Yeah.
But technically they could, and that's gonna go towards what they're paying at closing, if the contract doesn't fall apart. So that's, honestly, we had moved very far away from earnest money, and that was kind of being replaced with pre-approval and pre-qualification letters. And it wasn't as common, and now we're really seeing earnest money start coming right back up. I mean, almost every contract has it now because of the competitive market.
Yeah.
And that would be why USA Mortgage was just talking about their $5,000 guarantee on their pre-quals as well, because some people just don't have that money to put down as earnest money. That 5,000 guarantee is very similar, because if it defaults for any other reason besides, a seller problem, then that seller will get $5,000 if it doesn't close. And it's very enticing. They are still paying for the house. They're going to have to relist. That's another month that they weren't expecting. So that's money that they get. But I will say it's very rare. The fight over earnest money is never fun. It's very rare that the buyer gets that back.
No, and I was more thinking because the market and how crazy it is, a lot of times government loans aren't even looked at. So it'd be a way to sort of bring them to the forefront.
Absolutely. Yep. We've been seeing that a lot.
Yeah, government loans are tough right now, just in general, which kind of stinks. It is what it is. But yeah, you're right. I mean, earnest money is a great tool to use to say, hey, we're serious, and it is enticing. So yeah, for sure. And as far as I know, besides like Tori was saying, the lender requirements for, hey, you need X amount in your bank account for,
whatever,
cash to close kind of thing. Besides like those type of requirements, from what I know, there's no limit.
No, we had someone a couple months ago put $47,000 down in earnest money.
Specific number there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On like $100,000 house. It was kind of for other reasons that it got rocky. And that's another thing that can change, just like everything in the contract. The earnest money kept going up. Everyone agreed upon it, and that's what ended up happening. But at the end of the day, it goes towards closing. So everything was fine because it closed. If it didn't, yikes.
Yeah.
But yikes.
So after we've done the initial process of the contract, you've checked for corrections, you've submitted things into command, you might be working on some compliance, corrections here and there. This is what I kind of call now you're in the waiting period of the contract. This is where it's going to feel like, oh crap, should I be doing something? What you kind of feel like I said, it's just this waiting period. This is where all that stuff is done. Your inspection may have happened. You got those repairs. So we've sent the inspection notice to the sellers on time because you had it on your calendar. And now you've set your resolution period, calendar date, that kind of thing. So now it's what you're waiting on the seller response to the inspection. You're waiting on the appraisal to happen, that kind of thing. So this is a lot of times where I just kind of like to check in with everybody. I send an email out, say, to the title company, to the lender, to the other agent, to the client. Update the client on where you're at. Hey, we're just waiting on responses right now. I will keep you updated when I get the information. Just check in with them, check in with all the other people. Hey, is there anything you need from me? Is there a document? Are there any file corrections? So in the waiting period, this is a great time to just check in, make sure no one needs anything from you, that kind of thing. And you're gonna start getting your calendar reminders of, hey, appraisal should be due back in a couple days. So just start checking on things, really. That's kind of what you're doing right now. You're just kind of hanging out.
Another rule of thumb too, and then I have to go because I got my appointment time mixed up. But another thing too that I want to highlight, especially if you're newer for peace of mind, title and lending are going to need things from you just like they do from the client. So make sure that you're prompt with them. But another great thing about that is typically everything they send is going to have directions. And if it does not, please ask for those. So whether it's, hey, can you get me this document? If you don't know what that document is, you can ask, or you can ask the other agent for it, things like that. Don't feel like it's on you now to scramble, or another agent's gonna say, hey, will you complete these corrections for us? If your whole file is compliant and they're asking for compliance corrections, you gotta do it. So every brokerage has different compliance requirements. They might want a specific blank filled out on the contract that we do not require. Go ahead and do it for them and just explain to your clients, hey, Murney has a different brokerage compliance than we do, and this is what they need, and get it done. Other things like new builds, new construction, things like that, lenders will need specific documents. Government loans, they'll need specific documents. They will send those to you and ask you for them back. So just fill out that document. If you have questions, pick up your phone and ask them, but not every transaction is going to be the same. So just expect stuff like that to roll in and ask for directions if you don't know. Cool. I do have to head out.
Bye.
It was fun, guys.
I'm staying, don't worry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Nope. Have fun. Good luck.
Okay, so, you're in this kind of waiting period. You're waiting for responses. You're waiting on the appraisal, and hopefully when the appraisal comes in, it's all good. I'm sure you guys know what happens if it doesn't. You have to negotiate a new price, that kind of thing. That's a story and a discussion for another day, but might be paperwork that you need to do with that. But essentially you're checking on things, making sure they're all gonna come in on time. And the reason you're checking in on these things is because if you find out they're not gonna come in on time, you probably need to do an amendment, a contract amendment extending, say the lender's like, hey, appraisal's not gonna get in until this date. We're gonna be a little past our appraisal contingency. Okay, so we need to do an amendment extending the appraisal contingency a few days, that kind of thing. So you're just kind of checking on timelines at this point. Not a ton going on besides that. Although you're probably writing contracts on other houses at this time, so you probably are doing other things. But, and then, does everyone know what a reinspection is? This is probably the time that repairs have been agreed upon. Seller is making repairs, maybe repairs are done, so you want to go ahead and get a reinspection scheduled if your client wants that, if they want the repairs that have been done to be re-inspected by the inspector. So that might be something that happens during this period as well. And again, same thing with the initial inspection invoice. Figure out if this re-inspection invoice, which usually they're like $100. So they're a lot cheaper than a normal inspection invoice, but make sure that re-inspection invoice gets paid or gets sent to title as well.
Is that common?
A re-inspection?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's common,
Yeah.
but it's not rare.
Okay.
It's just the client preference, and it depends on what the repairs are. Like, for example, if there's a mega repair, like, hey, we had to do all new joists and girders in the crawl space because they were molded. You know what I mean? Like they were disintegrating from mold. That's a structural thing. You might want to have that re-inspected to make sure that it was done correctly. If it's little things, and it's up to the buyer. if the buyer, hey, they needed to replace all the outlets in the kitchen to GFIs. Okay, probably don't need that re-inspected in my opinion, but the buyer might think so. So just check in with them, say, hey, there is this option to have the repairs re-inspected. It's usually $100. Check with the specific inspection company to be sure on what the price is, but say, hey, it's $100. If you want it rechecked, we can absolutely do that for you. Put it on them, make them decide, because at the end of the day, you don't want that to come back on you if the repairs were not done correctly. And it's like, you don't want to get that call after closing. Hey, the toilet fell through the floor. That's a really dumb example, but you get what I'm saying. And it's like, oh crap,
Yeah.
we should have had that taken care of before closing. I flipped a house one time, and after closing, the main sewer line backed up into the house because a repair was supposed to have been made. Well, city made a repair that wasn't done properly. And day after closing, sewage backs up into the house, that kind of thing. It's like, well, yeah, no, we didn't really, they didn't have that re-inspected. Obviously we fixed it for them, but that kind of thing, you just don't want anything to fall back on you. So
Does that end up falling on the agent if a repair company doesn't do it properly?
no, not necessarily.
Yeah.
No, it's the repair should have done properly, but you want to make sure that you did your due diligence and
Yeah,
getting it
just encourage
checked and getting it checked. Just give them the option. Say, hey, you have this option to get the repairs re-inspected if that's going to make you feel more comfortable. And if they're like, we don't want to pay for it. Okay, fine. But if they do, then it's just another check and protecting your buyers,
Okay.
So you're getting that scheduled maybe. So then now, okay, we are a week out from closing. This is kind of when you have another big list of things to get done. And I always say it's like my closing week checklist. It can be whatever your 10-day before closing checklist, whatever you want to make it. So this is when I'm coordinating the final walkthrough. Does everyone know what a final walkthrough is? Does anyone not know what a final walkthrough is? So you're getting that scheduled. I always like to schedule it as close to closing as possible because sellers are moving out. They might damage something as they're moving out. So I try to make it even the morning of closing or just the night before. So that hopefully most of their stuff is out and there's not a huge opportunity for anything to get damaged that will need to then be argued over before closing. So schedule that final walkthrough. And the reason that you kind of want to wait for a week out is now you're pretty sure closing is going to happen on the scheduled date, that kind of thing. Schedule that final walkthrough. And honestly, and I have these checklists that I will hand out to you, but make yourselves a week before closing checklist of what you're going to do. This is when you're going to send your utilities email to, if you're the listing agent, it would be a nice thing if you're like, hey, I got all the utility information from my client. Here it is. Give it to the buyer's agent. If you're the buyer's agent, ask for the utility information, then give it to your clients. Remind them, you need to get utilities turned on in your name. This happens so much. The sellers will either forget to transfer it out of their names or the buyers will forget to transfer it into their names. And when that happens, if someone forgets to transfer the day of closing, if no one gets it transferred in, the power company is going to shut it off. And then you have to pay a fee to get it turned back on. So that's really important. A week out, send a utilities reminder email. And in that email, I include, like I said, whether it's the seller or the buyer, hey seller, remember to get your utilities transferred out of your name starting at the closing day. Or for a buyer, hey, remember to get them transferred into your names. And I'm also reminding them, hey, here's the closing date and time. Even though I have a calendar invite that you're included on, I'm gonna say it again in this email. Here's the address of the closing. Here are the things that you will need. And I say your driver's license and your cashier's check. And then in parentheses, I say, make sure to confirm with the lender. And of course, you as the agent are going to do this as well, but I also put it on the client that they need to be in contact with their lender a few days before closing to make sure that they have that final what amount they are bringing to closing in a cashier's check. So put that verbiage in that email. Cashier's check, very important. It's not a personal check. Title company won't accept that, unfortunately. This is where you're gonna review, get into your command, make sure your commission information is correct. Oh, I remember we had a price change. I need to change that commission amount. Oh, there's a little correction I need to do. Make sure your command is compliant, because like Tori said, if there's something that needs to be done, it might take days to get from the other agent. So this is what I do a week before. Also, another calendar notification that would be really good to have is maybe 3 days before closing, set yourself a calendar invite to ask the title company if they have closing statements ready, because you're gonna wanna see those. Sometimes they don't have them ready 3 days in advance. It just doesn't always happen, but it's a good reminder for you to ask. Because again, you want to be very proactive as the agent and not rely on people to send you things. You want to ask for it, because it happens. You're left off of an email. A title company forgets to send you the closing statements and they're incorrect. And you get to the closing table and the closing statement's incorrect and your commission amount is incorrect. And you're like, well, crap, I can't change it now. So ask for those closing statements a few days before closing and look at them. I know if you're new, you might not be able to understand what you're looking at. Call the title company and have them go over it with you. They do that all the time. So make sure you know what the numbers mean. And there's some stuff that their title company fees, you're not gonna have their fees memorized, but just see like, okay, yes, their fees are on there. What you're looking for as the agent, is my commission correct on this statement? If the inspection is to be paid at closing, is that invoice on there and is it for the correct amount? If there's a home warranty, we didn't really get into that. Home warranties are kind of not being asked for a lot in contracts right now because it's so competitive, but if you're the seller and your sellers had to make repairs on the house and they want to pay for those invoices at closing, which again, that's kind of a discussion you're having with the repairman too, because repairman might not allow for a pay at closing option. A lot of them do. Hey, they made this repair. They want to pay for it at closing. Is that invoice on there? So those are the kind of things that you're looking for as the agent, not necessarily like, well, that title fee isn't on there. Well, that's kind of on the title company to get put on there. So, so commission, repair invoices, inspection invoices, and you're also confirming that they have the correct sales price of the property. Because I mean, they're human too, they can make mistakes. Sales price, commission, earnest money. Sorry, not commission. Sales price, seller concessions, seller credit, they might call it, earnest money. Confirm that the title company has those amounts correct. And if not, tell them. And again, if you have questions on it, just call the title company. They will be glad to walk you through the fees and everything. So once you have confirmed that those are correct, send it to the client. The reason you need to know what you're talking about is because they probably will ask you questions as well once you send those to them. And again, you already had sent that email saying, hey, confirm with the lender what your final cash to close amount you're bringing to closing is. So that's something that day before closing, you're going to want to make sure, check in with your client. Hey, are you ready to go? You have your cashier's check ready to go, that kind of thing. So yay, then you go to closing and everything's so organized because you did all these things and it's clean and everything's correct and closing goes smoothly. So they're going to give you, your check and your closing documents. You take those, scan them in, put them in your DocuSign room, and then put them into Command. You will submit those. And again, this is stuff we can show you how to do, all the little details on how to actually use the technology, but you will need to turn in your check and your CD, closing docs, submit them through Command. And if your file is all compliant as far as those other folders, give your check to Landon, say, hey, here you go. This is ready to process. If you do that and your file is compliant and you do all that before noon, you should get paid that day, if not next day. If you turn in your check to Landon afternoon, it will be the next day. But just know, Landon cannot pay you unless your file is compliant. So if there's any red that has come back in command, you're not going to get paid, and that has to be taken care of. So after that, again, if you're the listing agent, you will have a calendar invite saying, hey, changed my listing to closed. Great, did that. And then if you're the buyer's agent, you kind of just want to check and make sure that the listing agent gave the correct credit to you, like whenever they put in the selling agent on Flex, make sure that it's you and they didn't actually accidentally put another agent's name. So basically just a checkbox of making sure Flex is accurate, the closing information is accurate. And then this is where you would send, your review link to your client, like, hey, congratulations. Hopefully the process was smooth and you get a good review, but like that. So that's when you would send your reviews to your clients, and then you get your nice little review that you can post on Facebook. Boom, done. That's it. Tammy's like, yeah, I know it's a lot.
Didn't even go into an explanation of half those things. So.
Yeah. So, okay, questions. I am open for any and all questions now. I know, I wish it's like this, specifically using command and filling out the commissions. I mean, I could do a whole another 2-hour class on that. So just come to my office. I sit in the main office, the executive office. So when you need help with that, or you've like just closed and you're like, what do I do with all these papers? I'll show you. That stuff is, we can help you on that. The main thing is making your checklist and following it. So I would say action items after this class today, or, throughout the next week or so, craft your email templates. And again, I'll give you guys my number too, so you can text me with any questions on those, but craft your email templates and set your calendar dates. Just sit down and think what comes up during a transaction, make a list and start making those email templates that you're going to send out every transaction to your clients so that every single thing is covered. I just do not recommend every single transaction you're manually sending emails, because you will forget something. So make them beforehand so they have all the information. But anyway, okay, open for questions.
I got one for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned paperwork to have an order for that go into title, I think it was, like the prepare invoices. I can check on concessions, make sure that's accurate, of course, on the contract, but once you put all that together on DocuSign, you put it in a file, and then you send it off as an offer. After that, it goes, if it's accepted, it goes to title, or you send it into title?
Yeah, so, and I'll give you this checklist as well. But basically, once you get something under contract.
Thank you.
There you go, that might make more sense. Once you get that file under contract, whether you're the buyer's agent or the listing agent, you're gonna send that contract and any important documents with it. They don't need like the buyer contracts, but like the contract, government loan rider, counter offer, those things. You're gonna send that, and you're gonna make a cover sheet with your commission amount, client information, who the other agent is, who the lender is, all the high points of the contract. Is there earnest money? When is it due? And I think Tori said Keller Williams might even have a sample cover sheet for you guys to use, but fill out that cover sheet, send it to the title company, lender, and the other agent all in an email together so that they do have the correct information, so that it should be correct when you do get those closing statements. Because they don't know your commission. I mean, you can assume it's 3%, but that's not always the case. And they need to know they need to confirm that. And if you have a transaction fee, they're gonna need to know that. So that's, you know, just something that you would put on there as well.
They'll be calling you either way, I'm sure.
Yeah, and they'll email you, but that's why it's so important, whether, it doesn't matter what side you're on. Send all of that information to everyone involved so they know who you are and how to get with you. And if they need something from you, they know where to find you, kind of thing.
Where did you say you could find a cover sheet?
I'll find out. You can make your own too, but
Kind of like a template.
yeah.
I use them at my old brokerage, but I haven't closed on one here yet. I'm under contract right now, but
Or just come to our office and I can show you ours too.
Okay.
Because we have a very detailed one, but the more, I will say on those cover sheets, the more detail, the better.
For sure.
Because it's for you to reference too, so.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can think of anything crazy that happens sometimes.
What was your phone number? I'm gonna get that.
Oh,
before we
yes,
go.
my phone number. I'm about to give it to
Chelsea.
you, huh?
It was Chelsea
Chelsea Phillips.
Phillips. Okay.
Yeah, it is 417-207-7752.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, just text me anytime. And like I said, inputting the documents and filling out the commission, once you do that a couple times, you'll be like, oh, this is so easy,
Definitely.
but it just takes doing it a couple times and doing it in the right order to kind of get how the things flow. But this is a great checklist. And if anyone online, I'll get with Nicole and make sure that everyone gets a copy of this checklist. And so when you get a contract, you can kind of sit down and literally with a pen mark these things off, and it'll just help you kind of stay on track. So
And
anything
then
else?
I may get a hold of you and have you kind of walk me through entering a transaction into command.
Yeah.
Because I had Nicole kind of walk me through it yesterday briefly, but I have most of the documents completed, I guess, but it would help if I kind of walk through it with someone.
Yeah.
I think.
I know, it's just doing it, sitting down with someone and physically doing it, because I'm the same way. I can't just watch a video
That's me.
and know how to use the technology. No, I need to have a transaction and physically do it. And once you do it once, you'll be like, oh, okay, I totally get it now.
Are you referring to DocuSign?
Oh, just in general, DocuSign, Command, everything,
Yeah, those two, yeah.
Flex,
I've watched it a couple times now, but I need to get the templates in DocuSign. So I was
Okay.
wondering if you can maybe help me out with that, so
Yeah, just
after or whenever.
the templates as far as the documents, pre-filling the documents and everything.
The pre-filled well, I know you gotta fill out the documents themselves, but I don't have anything on DocuSign right now.
Okay, so
Nothing.
you're just starting from the beginning. I get what you're saying now.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't have-
It's great. DocuSign is great.
I actually might have the wrong DocuSign profile. I'm still
Okay,
using a personal email at the moment.
okay.
I had a KW email.
Why don't you come upstairs after and we'll figure that out?
Because the
Okay.
documents already come on there, don't they?
Yeah,
Just, draft them in, I guess.
Mhm.
Or input
yeah,
them in.
we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
anything else? Anyone online? I'm not good with Zoom, so I can't even see who all's online. But if you have any questions, come see me. I'm in the main office, or just text me. And I will send these checklists to you guys, or have Nicole do it, so that you can have something that's kind of a guide when you get something under contract. So I know it's scary. I know, but it gets better. Don't worry. And you will mess up, and that's okay. We all do. Don't think I'm sitting up here like, oh, I've never made a mistake, because boy, have I. And some big ones. So it happens, but most things are fixable. And as long as you are honest and communicate with everybody involved, you'll do just fine.
So you specialize more on the closing side of things?
Yeah, I was an agent,
Okay.
and my life has just changed, and my schedule doesn't allow for me to be an agent anymore. So I am now a transaction coordinator, and I've done that for about the same amount of time I was an agent now. So
Did
yeah.
you say you aren't allowed to be an agent anymore? Is that what you said?
No, I'm still licensed. I'm just
Yeah.
saying my life, what I do now, I'm a musician, and so
Yeah.
I don't have weekends, so I can't be an agent. I
Yeah,
mean, I
makes
would never
sense.
sell a house. I just like, it's like I could sell a house on a Tuesday afternoon, but how often does that happen?
For
So
sure.
it's just like, it doesn't work for my personal schedule anymore, and I'm better at this stuff anyway.
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome.
but I am licensed, and I have been on every side of the transaction. So I understand everything that y'all are going through and are learning and all that. So,
I have a question.
yes.
How long did it take you to feel good at what you're doing as a transaction coordinator? I mean, will it take weeks,
You ever get there?
days, months?
So I will say, so I was an agent. When I was an agent, I started out on a team, and we had a transaction coordinator. So when I went off on my own, I knew how to write a contract. I knew all that. I knew nothing. I didn't even know how to fill out. I didn't know how to fill out anything. And that was like, it was terrifying. So the first step is learning the real estate process, because if you don't know that, you won't be able to do this properly, because you won't know what you're looking for. So it's like, you have to know that first. And this checklist can only do so much of that. It's like, you kind of have to know, oh yeah, we do an appraisal, I need that kind of thing. So it's like sitting down and talking with an agent about, and I probably should have, just making a timeline. There might even be one in here of like the timeline of a contract, which you all probably at least know that. It's like
Isn't
under
that in
contract,
command?
inspection, appraisal, closing, that kind of thing.
Isn't that in command? It says do this now and do that.
Probably.
Okay.
But I would say, if you are starting one, because I know in your situation, you've probably been thrown into the middle of some things.
Yes.
So once
And I
you've
come
done.
from a background though in commercial, so I understand the
Okay.
basics of it.
Yeah, so
But the
you're already way
process is quite a
ahead.
bit different.
So once you've done start to finish 5 contracts,
That should be good.
because things are gonna pop up differently in each contract. So, I feel like once you've done 5 contracts, start to finish, you'll be like, okay, I know what I'm doing now. So yeah,
That's reassuring, okay.
you will feel better and better after each contract. And especially when after you do that first one, start to finish, you're gonna be like, okay, I'm seeing what I'm missing. You're gonna make mistakes. It just is what it is. But yeah, I don't know that I could put a number on it, but seriously, 3 to 5, you're gonna start feeling like you're a little more in control. Yeah, you'll get there. Like now, I'm like, I could do this in my sleep. I don't even need a checklist anymore, because it's just ingrained in my head, like I'm a robot. Like, I think I have, so we're a transaction coordination company, and so we have to have like rock solid systems, obviously, because we're doing 60 contracts at a time. So it's like, I'm just like, I don't have an appraisal on this random property, So eventually you get to the point where you just know. But it just takes practice, and it takes doing it. And I know it's scary, but luckily there's always someone willing to help at this office. You just walk down the halls and say, I need help with this, just yell, and someone will come out of their office and help you.
I've noticed that. It's like if you don't know something, they'll tell you what they need or what you did wrong or whatever.
Yeah.
In a nice way.
Yeah, exactly. It depends on if you want the blunt answer or you want like the little bit softer approach, whether you ask Jim or Dawn. If you want a really blunt answer, go to Jim. If you want a little softer, approach, maybe go to Dawn.
I have noticed that with Jim.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you'll get a really fast answer from Jim, but it might hurt your feelings.
That's the truth. I get my feelings hurt so easily, and he's like, "No, what did I tell you to read?" And I'm like, "I don't even know."
Yeah, so maybe if you're new
Tell me
and you're a
again.
little sensitive, talk to Dawn first.
And I came from a female broker, so then whenever I was asking Jim, I was like,
Yeah,
not ready to.
uh-huh. Two very different
He's so nice,
styles.
though. He's very helpful, but. That's
So this checklist will help you guys a ton, but again, I'm here when you need me, so thank you to everyone online for attending. Sorry we didn't go through any of the slides, we just don't, we just want to speak from the heart. So, have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
I guess I just click stop.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess Nicole comes and does everything else. Thank goodness.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I know there's so much. It's like,
Yeah, and
I could teach this for 5 hours, but
I just started getting comfortable with where I was and then the routines that we kind of had. Because I did like 3 or 4 transactions over there, and I've only been in real estate for
where
about
was that
7
other
months.
brokerage?
Coldwell Banker.
Oh, okay.
So we used like all different like signing, we used .loop, all that kind of stuff. So I just got really comfortable with it.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I know my stuff. And then I switched and I'm like, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
Those new systems, which is okay. And especially like yesterday, Nicole helped me like connect the dots more. So I think that they're all great systems. I just haven't used them in a full transaction yet.
Right,
So
right. And
once I do a couple, will be fine.
yeah, command looks scarier than it is, I will say.
Yeah.
Well, imagine us as agents. Hang on.